Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Aloha, hafa day to each of you attending from Hawaii, Guam, or the mainland. My name is Al Ogata, and I'm the president and CEO of CyberHawaii. That's my slides. My slides rotating?
No.
No, you're on the main slide.
Still on the main slide. There's technical difficulties.
SD.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay, so CyberHawaii is a nonprofit information sharing and workforce development organization. We focus on improving cyber resiliency in Hawaii's small and mid-sized businesses, as well as within the community as a whole. We're supported through membership dues provided by the organization shown here, as well as by the state of Hawaii and through partnerships with numerous federal agencies. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 Fortify Cybersecurity Educational Series. This series is brought to you through a partnership between CyberHawaii and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Today's webinar will discuss the topic of the convergence of physical and cybersecurity. While we study and plan for threats, While we study and plan for threats within very clear boundaries and domains, most threat actors don't bother to follow any rules. To steal our money or information, they'll employ any technique that's effective, whether it's an online tool, physical threats or violence, or just old-fashioned flim-flam techniques. To protect ourselves and our businesses, we need to be prepared for threats that cross the boundary between the digital and physical worlds. To do this, we must understand how physical security meshes with cybersecurity. This convergence of techniques is the subject of today's webinar. According to CISA, convergence is a formal collaboration between previously disjointed security functions. Organizations with converged cybersecurity and physical security functions are more resilient and better prepared to identify, prevent, mitigate, and respond to threats. Convergence also encourages information sharing and developing unified security policies across security divisions. Questions should be entered into the chat window and will be read at pauses in the presentation. This presentation is also being recorded, and the recording will be available on the CyberHawaii website in a few days. In addition, the presenters have agreed that you can contact them after today's presentation should you have any questions or need their assistance. Their email addresses will appear during the presentation. During this presentation, you're requested to remain on mute unless asking questions during designated Q&A sections. Your presenters today are Gen Tamura and Allison Yakabe. Gen currently serves as Protective Security Advisor for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Honolulu District, which includes Hawaii, Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands, and American Samoa. As a PSA, Mr. Tamura provides subject matter expertise in critical infrastructure protection and vulnerability mitigation and facilitates local field activities in coordination with other Department of Homeland Security offices. He also advises and assists state, local, territorial, and private sector officials and critical infrastructure facility owners and operators. Allison works as the DHS Intelligence Officer for Northern California, assigned to the Fusion Center in San Francisco. In this role, she makes the intelligence cycle work for local partners across all sectors of critical infrastructure. Allison draws on over a decade of experience at the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, including 7 years as the lead cyber intelligence analyst. She holds an MA in international security with a concentration in remote sensing from the University of Denver and a BA in environmental studies from Dartmouth. Excuse me. And with that introduction, I'll turn the mic over to Gen and Allison to start us off.
All right. Thanks, Al. Appreciate the intro.
Yep, you bet.
And all right. And let me share my slides and let me know if you all can see that.
Yes, coming through.
All right. All right. Hey, thank you guys very much. Thank you, Al, for having us. Appreciate the opportunity to brief everybody on this, what we consider to be a very important topic, convergence of cyber and physical systems. I think a lot of times people just think about each individual system independently, both on the cyber side and the physical side. But we like to highlight the importance of having discussions and having that convergence between those two different areas. As Al mentioned, my name is Gen Tamura. I'm one of the protective security advisors for CISA here in the Hawaii district. Like Al mentioned, we service Hawaii, Guam, Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands, and American Samoa. And then if we need to and support our other PSAs on the mainland, we will deploy and help them out in their areas in the mainland states. So good morning to those in Guam and in the CNMI, and appreciate everybody jumping on board. For myself, been with CISA for the last 4 years, and previous to that was with a different federal agency. But glad to see a lot of familiar names on this webinar, and look forward to briefing you guys on this. So let me real quick. So for us, our the importance of this is talking about that convergence of the cyber and physical systems. It isn't just something that we talk about these days. It's really a strategic approach, how you address these as an organization, how you address these as a system within your companies or within your agencies or organizations. So whether it's a small organization, whether it's a large organization, having the discussions amongst both the physical and the cyber side is very important. So what we're going to talk about today are about the cyber and physical assets that represent some significant vulnerabilities within each organization, and how they can be targeted separately or both simultaneously, leading to potential compromise or leading to compromised systems and the infrastructure itself. What we find that when cyber and physical security operate in different silos, they really lack that holistic view of how to protect their entire enterprise and how they can partner with each other in making things a little bit more streamlined or a consolidated approach towards the end goal of protecting the organization. So the objectives for this webinar, we're going to look at enhancing your knowledge and awareness of cybersecurity by providing those practical insights and talking about collaboration. And then we'll address emerging trends and try to empower you to build those resilient defenses for your organizations or your agencies. We really...
Hey, again, I just want to
Yeah.
let you know, your slides aren't advancing. You're still on the first slide.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, is it okay? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then we really want to reach that diverse audience, and I see that on on this webinar, which is going to be great. So what we're going to do next is we're going to set the tone for this webinar, and what we're going to do is we are going to have a threat brief from Allison, who is from DHS Intelligence and Analysis and is an intelligence officer there. So I will hand this over to Allison, and she can give the threat brief, and then following that, we'll move forward with the presentation.
Thanks, Gen. Do you need me to do my slides? Let me just share them.
Or I got them up here.
Oh, you got them. Okay. Yeah, let's roll into it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, CyberHawaii and Gen. We don't actually have a nonprofit out here that does similar work, so it's fascinating. And I'm a fairly new intelligence officer. I've been at the Fusion Center for a really long time, and cyber is my background. So I was really excited that my boss sent me this speaking engagement. And I am familiar with the originating CISA doc that discusses convergence. And that's what I thought we were talking about. But that was several years ago now. That was 2021. So here we are, 2024. And I'm talking about the threat landscape as courting convergence. So thinking from a threat actor perspective, if you're coming at an organization and you know that their physical and cybersecurity departments don't speak very well together, they don't do information sharing, that's a vulnerability in itself. So the threat landscape is just asking us to close this vulnerability, which Gen's going to talk about further, and so that we can minimize the attack vectors available to the threat actor. So I'm not going to talk today about confirmed vulnerabilities or exposures, those CVEs with all the numbers. I'm not going to talk about those because that's a separate issue. We do information sharing for those separately. The point is that we're sharing information today so that others can defend themselves. As an intel officer, the first question I get asked when I'm submitting a report is, does this have operational impact? So it's kind of a tandem. How many systems were impacted, and is there operational impact? And that's really where we need that information sharing. Of course, we're anonymizing, so it's always up to the sector. It's a transportation sector agency. It's an agricultural sector entity. We're never naming victims, not in the business of shaming victims. But DHS, especially the Field Operations Division, which is my organization, we're one of the only agency required to make the intelligence cycle work up to the feds. So I'm trying to build intelligence for the feds in the hopes that others can defend themselves, and also sharing down that sector specific information to you guys, to sector specific partners at the local level. So I love these sorts of engagements. And I do want to say, I'm moving along to, can we do next slide, please? So a lot of times the information that we're getting in the intelligence enterprise is also available on open source. So I've pulled some of my favorite examples of cyber incidents with physical consequences. So that's what we're talking about in terms of that convergence. And why do we need it? Why do we need to do this? Because cyber attacks have physical consequences. So if those two heads aren't talking to each other, again, that's a vulnerability that a threat actor can exploit. So I wanted to highlight, these are a lot from Northern California. There's a little nod to Hawaii down there. But when we're talking about cyber incidents affecting critical infrastructure, you'll see Colonial Pipeline at the top. That was a dark side black matter incident from 2021. And it's dark side black matter has since evolved. So now we have Black Cat, we have Black Basta, we have all kinds of black themed ransomware variants. And it's essentially the same operators, the same ransomware operators. They're just moving to the next big ticket, to the next payday for them. So Colonial Pipeline had operational impact for the distribution of oil and gas. And then here, city of Oakland, it's one of many cities with ransomware incidents. They had a really hard time recovering. They ended up getting sued by their law enforcement union because all the PII was harvested. All the PII of the union members was harvested. Like, really bad day for city of Oakland. They're also out millions of dollars in payroll that they paid out based on historic payroll data, which is what, like, it's a general policy. You pay out the last 2 weeks for the future if there is an incident, but they ended up in the hole millions of dollars, and now they have to try to claw that back. Oldsmar water treatment is an interesting one for us in San Francisco in the Bay Area, because we had a water treatment incident, and those get a ton of attention because they can inspire panic. So let's see, here we are. The Revel JBS is a meat packing company, so they have meat packing distribution. CrowdStrike is kind of a famous one now. It's way more recent. And I can tell you, in the opening minutes, in the opening hours, and even like first 24 of that attack, it wasn't an attack. The thought was that it was a cyber attack. That's where your head goes. This must be a cyber incident. It turned out to be a bug. Kind of bad practice for CrowdStrike, but the operational impact affected multiple critical infrastructure sectors, and that was only a glitch. That was only a bug. So the importance of messaging and timely messaging from all sides is important. Here we go. Ransomware attack on Dole Food Company, blocked North American production. They have a facility down in Thousand Oaks, which is Southern California. They also have one here in Monterey. food distribution. So ransomware, the goal of ransomware for the threat actors is financial gain, but it has operational impact. Additionally, whether or not you pay the ransom, you're going to lose money because you can't get your product. You can't ship product. Another one against a water facility in Texas, very small. That was a denial of service attack that was claimed to have a great, a lot of times threat actors, their bark is bigger than their bite. So that's the need for threat intelligence. We're providing the context around these incidents for our partners. The famous Change Healthcare incident that affected patients going to the pharmacy, they couldn't pick up their prescription because it was showing they were out of network and that their prescription would cost thousands of dollars when they were not. It was just an actual cyber attack. Change Healthcare was actually Black Cat. So we had dark side black matter up top and then Black Cat down at the bottom. And then China-backed hackers are infiltrating Guam cyber infrastructure. They are referencing, this is an open source Microsoft report about Volt Typhoon, Chinese cyber threat group. Is Hawaii next? Well, CISA knows more about that than I do, so I'm not going to spoil their fun. But I wanted to highlight these incidents as a matter of sharing information that shows that a cyber attack can have physical consequences. We worry about this from a physical security perspective too. What if you coordinate a cyber attack inducing panic around the water, around water quality at the same time as you're conducting a physical cyber attack? It has an amplifying effect for any type of incident. So I'm going to move into a couple examples of how this plays out in the real world. This one was kind of recent from April. We had 911 and 311 outages across multiple states in the Midwest, Western US, Nevada, South Dakota, Nebraska. And I can tell you that as a cyber intel analyst, everyone got spun up right away, presuming that it was a cyber attack, kind of in the same way as they did with CrowdStrike. And it's not until later on that you realize, wait a minute, there was this one provider, Lumen Technologies, also known as CenturyLink. CenturyLink is kind of like the Comcast of the Midwest, you could say. So it was an outage caused by a physical disruption. Someone cut, or there was a physical incident at a light pole. They installed a light pole and they broke something. They cut a fiber cable. So we're always in the immediate incident, we're always assuming the worst. I get paid to assume the worst and run down all possible scenarios until I find out what's actually going on and asking those questions. So what is the pattern of escalation and notification within an organization for an incident like this? Does it go up? Does it go across the physical? Does it go to your CSO? Does it go to your CISO? And all the executives, are they all treated as executives with a need to know for a cyber incident or a physical incident that has operational impact as well? And so, of course, this one, not actually a cyber attack, kind of like CrowdStrike, but it did get everyone spun up because, again, it's 911 and 311. These are emergency dispatch services. If those services go out and there is a physical attack, for example, a terrorist attack, it degrades law enforcement ability to respond, first responders' ability to respond to those incidents. All right, my last two favorite ones. This is our claim to fame in San Francisco. A Tracy resident, Tracy's a suburb of Oakland, essentially. A Tracy resident was sentenced to serve home confinement and probation for a computer attack on Discovery Bay Water Treatment Facility. This guy only got 18 months of home confinement. And when I talk to you about what he did, you'll just be like, what? His name was Rambler Gallo. That's his real name. And he was a contractor at this water treatment facility, Discovery Bay, over in the East Bay. And he separated from employment. But before he did that, he made sure that he had persistent access to their water treatment facility, their industrial control systems, and was able to add or delete software for managing chemicals in the water system. So really bad stuff. And what's the failure of the organization in terms of physical security? They didn't confiscate his equipment. They didn't deny his access once he was terminated from employment. Where was the asset control in that incident? So even though he worked in IT, he had a high level of access to begin with. The processes and procedures for terminating his employment didn't exactly follow through. And the really interesting thing here is that once this guy was separated from Discovery Bay, he went and got a job at another water treatment plant, also in the East Bay. So when we're talking about the need for insider threat analysis, insider threat mitigation, this is the perfect case. This guy has a pattern of habitually doing odd things, illegal things at his places of business. So I've kind of always said, if I was an insider threat analyst at a private company, I might have a kind of boring job because I'm just spying on my internal employees. But these little incidents kind of show the need for coordination across those sorts of programs. And the last example, gray market components found at a transportation sector entity. It's a pretty famous one in the Bay Area. It's a regional transportation sector entity. And what happened was they were going through upgrades. They were upgrading their security equipment, which is a great idea. They were upgrading switches, routers, power supplies, UPS's uninterrupted power supplies. And what happened was their contractor ended up purchasing gray market components, which is another way of saying secondhand components from eBay. So the tricky thing about these gray market components is that they're also known as parallel imports. So they're manufactured in foreign countries and sold in those countries to do a specific job for a specific purpose. But then they're imported into the United States secondhand, where they might do the same thing, they might do something different, but they've already been active in another operational environment. So these ones were coming in from foreign countries such as Turkey, such as China, with perhaps pre-configured settings. You don't actually know who has maintained persistent access to them if you're buying them on eBay. So is that a failure of physical security? I don't know, probably purchasing for not vetting those pieces of equipment and making sure that they were original and brand new. But it kind of goes to show you that the deception and the physical access is really the first line of defense. So you don't need to be a cyber genius if you've already been able to log into these machines or these systems or switches from a foreign country. That physical access is the first thing that needs to be denied to a threat actor. For example, if they have your credentials, if they have your admin credentials, they don't need to be on site. They can do that from anywhere. So once they have that physical access, the rest is kind of secondary. The rest is more easy for them to conduct. So again, just demonstrating the need for cyber physical coordination and information sharing. A lot of times, well, in one case, we had an incident response where we had the National Guard come in to this same transportation sector agency, actually, and they couldn't get access to the systems they needed to do their incident response because there was so much infighting in that organization about who was responsible for what was sensitive information. So that illustrates the conflicting personalities and the operational environment that's a little challenging at that organization. It's not surprising that they had a ransomware incident. It's not surprising that they ended up with gray market components because there wasn't information sharing or consensus-based relationships formed at all at any level. So that was an opportunity for a threat actor to get in there a couple different ways, actually, not the same threat actor, a couple different ways. So I just wanted to set the stage. Thank you so much for having me. I will hang on to the call in case there's questions later, but thanks again. Thanks, CyberHawaii.
All right, thanks, Allison. Appreciate that. And, appreciate that setting that up so that people understand what the connection between cyber and the physical is. So that once we start going through this, then people have a better understanding. So as you can see on this chart, it's talking about the importance of convergence. Today we're so interconnected with the systems, both on the cyber and the physical side. So it's really not just a strategic advantage, it's really a necessity, just the way things are in these systems these days. So, this is one way to think about it. How do you start thinking about how to integrate both cyber and physical security efforts? How do you get the CSOs and the CISOs talking? This gives you an idea of how interconnected we are with all these different systems that we use for different organizations and different agencies. So when we talk about the traditional cyber systems and the traditional physical systems, we see that there could be that overlap between them. And then that's where we talk about this cyber physical system, CPS convergence. You have the technology and the processes, but then you also have on the physical side, the operational attributes and the processes for physical technologies. One is on the digital environment, but then on the physical side, we're looking at safeguarding life and property. So looking at that, I think, I don't have to explain that any further. Whether you're on the physical side or the cyber side, you tend to understand what both of those are. So when we look at this holistic security, on the left side, we see physical security. We're talking about deterrence, detection, delaying, and then your response. But then on the cyber side, we have things that might be a little bit similar, but we have prevention, we have the detection, correction, and then deterrence. So how do you get these things to both align? When you look at it holistically, yeah, you can say that, it's a matter of discussing things, but a lot of ways you can do this is the integrated approach, having those conversations, having, comprehensive threat assessments, not just a cyber assessment, not just a physical security assessment, but how do you bridge those together so that both sides are able to see how they can contribute, participate in any of the assessments that actually happen. So, some of the benefits for convergence is, you may have improved threat detection. You may have enhanced incident response because you have both sides talking to each other. Resource optimization. When I say resources, a lot of times, what first comes to mind? Resources, a lot of times it's money. How do you optimize what you're going to do and how you're going to do it? Then you have resilience and recovery. How do you become more resilient? And then how can you help each other by recovering, when you have an incident that bridges both the physical and the cyber side? Some things to think about when you're looking at that holistic security. So this is like a case study, kind of gives you an idea of an incident that happened. But just an overview of this, it's, there was a state-sponsored cyber attack that unleashed this virus that crippled the global shipping industry. And, the attack penetrated the network and, incapacitated the actual company. The company suffered more than about a 10 billion loss in damages. And it just really shows that catastrophic impact of not having that converged cyber security approach. So this really shows that need for, one, regular software updates, but also these comprehensive security assessments and the collaboration between the IT side and the OT side. When we talk about shipping, when we talk about supply chain in the Pacific, we all know how important it is because we're dependent on ships coming in, all the way from the West Coast coming to Hawaii, and then even going further to, our Guam and CNMI partners. So when you think about how this impacts everybody, it really is a big deal when we talk about how to protect and how to be resilient against anything that could potentially happen. So, we look at this, we look at patch management, how can you learn from that, backups, network segmentation, and then also software integrity. Another example, a large US company. This company had faced, significant financial consequences. They had, over like 120 security violations stemming from non-compliant practices. But when you look at that and you see different violations, and there isn't a consolidated approach, a coordinated approach, this is where you have different issues that come up. There's lack of incident plans, mitigation for the introduction of some kind of malicious code, protection manager not identified in a timely manner. So it's like kind of the response part of it. But then, what are some solutions? You can develop more robust incident plans, maybe incorporate, both physical and the cyber side and have those kind of discussions. The use of policy of cyber assets and removable media, but then documentation is always key. So anything that has to do with delegations of authority, any kind of management types of documents, memos, this is where, you know, you can help by strengthening the posture of your organization. So in this too, you know, another U.S. Power grid operator, you know, significant security incident, but it really allowed, this vulnerability allowed the attackers to really continuously reboot the grid's operators' firewalls. So, you know, of course, this causes a problem, and especially when it comes to power. We are dependent a lot on power when you think about things such as cameras and what are cameras connected to. It might be connected to servers and the internet. So when these things go out, you know, there's a huge impact in the trickle down effect of cascading impacts when these types of things happen. So in this incident, you know, there's disruption of communications and control systems. So of course it affects grid stability and management. Then you start looking at these existing security measures and protocols, you know, are they effective? Are they adequate? And then, you know, overall, then you start looking at how this is going to affect industry. You know, how are they going to improve these things so that this type of incident, you know, does not happen? Then when we talk about devices impacted, you know, there was this Ripple 20 vulnerability. So back then in this, you know, June of 2020, there's a group of about 19 vulnerabilities collectively known as Ripple 20 was discovered, but it was affecting millions of connected devices across numerous sectors. So it wasn't just one. And so when you looked at these vulnerabilities, you know, they included things like smart home devices, industrial control systems, healthcare equipment, transportation system. You know, this really is a big impact because anybody could be affected. So when you talk about this, you know, the key impacts, what are you going to look at? You look at data breaches, device malfunctions, operational disruptions. But, you know, lessons learned, what is the importance of regular vulnerability assessments? And when I talk about that, it can be those combined ones where you have a cyber and a physical, but then also timely software updates, and then also robust, you know, IoT security measures. How do you do that and how do you communicate those things? Of course, when you have, you know, your challengers and barriers, you know, how do you align those security functions? On the left, you see, you know, when you have those siloed security operations versus your converged security operations. You know, how do we do that? You know, how do we get out of those siloed, I guess, channels when we talk about it? You know, the impact of communication gaps, that's huge because communication is one of the big things which causes these vulnerabilities or, you know, these gaps when you're trying to coordinate these efforts. But then also, if you're not having these conversations together, the resources, how do you address that? How do you maximize, you know, I guess your ability to strengthen or mitigate against different vulnerabilities? You may lose that if you don't have those converged security operations. So of course, communication gaps, one of the big things. You know, how do you try and eliminate or minimize the amount of communication gaps? You know, initiate that dialogue, have conversations. You know, when you think about your organizations, does your physical security folks talk to your cybersecurity folks? You know, it could be as simple as maybe generating different meetings. But then you also need to look at leadership roles. You know, how are those affected? You may have a chief security officer and then also a chief information security officer, but are they really talking and do they understand how their roles are going to impact the organization? And then if you have a convergence team that can discuss things, move through, have discussions about, you know, what is the best way to move forward, you know, that can only help when you have that team of both, you know, your physical and your cyber side. And then that falls into this information sharing. How do you engage that so that they have full communications with each other and are being able to communicate that across both the physical and the cyber side? So of course, you know, I had talked a little bit about this resource allocation. When I think about resources, I always think about money, but how do you formalize team roles and responsibilities? You know, how do you establish that structure? You know, is it that the CISO and the CSO have those discussions and set that up? But then you have to think about what are those linked assets? How do you coordinate what is linked together and what are the connections between both the cyber and the physical side? And then that can help you conduct those vulnerability assessments to have a joint one or have something that bridges between both physical and cyber so that you have a better idea of what you may need to do when you have mitigation measures or any kind of initiatives or efforts to try and mitigate against different kinds of vulnerabilities. And one of the ways you can determine that baseline is by having those vulnerability assessments. Normally, as I speak with some of our stakeholders and our partners, when we do assessments, I always say, you know, this is not a report card. It is basically to give you a baseline assessment of your facility, of your security posture, so you can either figure out how you want to increase or mitigate against different vulnerabilities, but it'll give you a baseline of where you are. So of course, proposed solutions, you know, when you have converged security functions, you know, what are those proposed solutions? So you have cybersecurity, security assessments, you know, whether it's physical or cyber, you know, having those will give you that baseline. Talking about those best practices. Maybe somebody has a best practice, maybe from a different organization or within each of those different areas on the physical or the cyber side. When you talk about vulnerability patch management, network segmentation or monitoring, but then on the physical side, you can also, you know, think about your best practices of what you may be doing or what you are planning to implement for your organization. Having unified policies will also help you just so that you're coming from a common voice when it talks about both of these security areas. Just because if you have one that's talking about strictly information security and then you want to have one strictly on physical security, they may not tend to match up. But if it's a unified policy, at least everybody's speaking off of the same sheet of paper. And then when it gets to information sharing, of course, that's huge. How do you do that? How do you set up those regular meetings? How does everybody get the same information rather than it just being siloed and you're only getting certain things from specific partners or specific sources of information? So on here, talking about those security assessments, both myself and then my partner, Joe Stranhagen, he, you know, can also do the physical security side, but then we also have cybersecurity advisors or cyber state coordinators that can help with those vulnerability assessments. So as it shows here, you know, you're identifying vulnerabilities, the assessments can help you do that. It can also help you by giving you options for consideration and improving your resilience. Our assessments will show those things. And then also talking about risk management, how do you prioritize and allocate based upon what your assessments say? And then of course, this last part is, you know, how do you adapt to change? You know, as years go on and new management may come in, you may have to change the way you address some of your security measures. But at least if you have a baseline of how you want to address it, at least you're able to, you know, speak to that and be able to continue on the same path rather than stopping and starting in a completely different, I guess, pathway, you know, if there are those changes. Now, of course, best practices. I think a lot of you, you know, see this and know this, you know, regular vulnerability scanning or assessments, patch management, risk assessment, and automated tools and solutions. I think a lot of folks have been using that recently. Then you have things such as regular penetration testing. You know, if those are things that you're interested in, of course, we have our cybersecurity advisors, we have our cyber state coordinators. They're always willing to discuss those types of things with you. But one of the basic things, and I think CyberHawaii has been doing this quite a bit, you know, just in this whole webinar series, is training and awareness. How do you manage that, you know, even if it goes down to the basic level, to give them, you know, to protect the organization as well as the individuals themselves. So unified policies, you know, we see on here physical security systems, cybersecurity systems, But then you get into the operational technology and information technology. So if you're an IT person, then you understand that IT and the OT side. But how do you do I guess your steps to unifying security policies? Evaluate what your current policies are, maybe see how they may match up with the other security system. How do you align your objectives? You can have those meetings to discuss them. But then you're also talking about, when you talk about policy, what are those comprehensive coverages that you should have both on the cyber and the physical side? Standardized process procedures will also help, so that you're not always trying to think of what you need to do, but standardize how you do it. And then also having that cross-functional collaboration amongst interdepartments, shared responsibilities. Even though people will say cyber and physical are different, there are shared responsibilities that everyone's trying to do for the good of the organization. Oh, sorry about that. And then we get to things, of course, back to training and awareness, and then getting into policy enforcement. How do you do that? Who's looking at that? But if it's not written down and you figure out how to enforce policy or compliance, and then also having disciplinary measures, you don't want to always have to think about what to do. As long as it's documented, what ways you want to address anything when it comes to enforcement. So of course, information sharing is huge. How do you create that culture of collaboration? Sometimes it might be just starting up meetings. How do you establish clear communication channels? Everybody speaking in the same voice, everyone speaking until everybody understands each of the acronyms or anything like that. That's one way to have those clear communication channels. And then how do you develop standard operating procedures? Policies, procedures, how to set those up both on the cyber and the physical side. And then when you have those cross-functional teams, that's how you may be able to help, standardize different things because you're working for that common good. The training on awareness again pops up. And then how do you leverage technology? And then also encouraging that no blame culture. Everybody's learning, even though you may have enforcement, but how do you encourage people to learn and to share all of that information? So we have on here, how integrated are your cyber and your physical security functions? You can ask yourself, I don't know if you can put it into the chat, but, are you not integrated, partially integrated, fully integrated? And then also, what's your biggest challenge your organization faces in having a converged security function? Is it communication? Is it resource allocation? Is it funding, lack of expertise, or is it something else? What other types of things, would you want to share, about your organization if you were to try and have this converged cyber and physical security function? And what might you run into as some of your challenges when it comes to that? So of course, the desired outcome when you come to this cyber and physical convergence is conducting the security assessments. How do you identify, evaluate your security posture? How do you get that baseline of identifying what your vulnerabilities are? How do you foster interdepartmental communication? How do you have open lines of communication? How do you develop those unified security policies? The policies that you have, can they be expanded to incorporate other areas, whether it's on this physical or the cyber side? Investment in technology is huge and might be expensive, but this is where, having those conversations, how do you bridge that and how do you use all of your resources available to invest in that technology? And then also, how do you provide training and awareness programs on a regular and consistent basis in order to maintain and teach, all of these security measures, whether it is existing employees, and whether it's long-term employees, or even if it is employees that have just onboarded. So all of the different things that come on a continual basis in order to teach. So the long-term impact, of course, if you're able to do these things, you have an improved resilience, you reduce risks, and you have enhanced trust and confidence in both sides of the house. And then there could potentially be a cost savings if you're working together rather than in silos. You may be able to leverage one another and think about how you can, I guess, help each other when it comes to different technologies or ways you want to reduce the resilience or not resilience, reduce vulnerabilities and increase your resilience. So, in conclusion, the big thing about this, about cyber physical convergence, is how do you enhance that collaboration? Breaking down silos sometimes is very difficult, but sometimes it could just be having conversations. It could just be having regular meetings. It could just be as simple as having a lunch with somebody to start the conversations. How do you update those security protocols? Do you regularly review, update security protocols, or are these things that have sat on the shelves? Maybe that's something that if it comes in a regular, I guess, collaboration venue, then you might be able to have deeper conversations on both sides, physical and cyber, when it comes to updating security protocols. And then also, this last part, even though it may be expensive, investing in technology could help you simplify things, as long as they're vetted, as long as there's the conversations between both physical and the cyber side. Technology can be a good avenue in order to address these things. But then also you have to think about how do you leverage those resources that both sides may have in order to reduce the amount of impact as an organization as a whole. A lot of times when I've worked with some folks, different stakeholders, there's some that have a very strong relationship between the physical and the cyber side. And then there's some where, it takes a little bit in order for them to have those conversations. But once you start to initiate that, it usually happens. And it's a good sign when they start having those conversations and being able to realize the importance and the partnership that each of them can bring to the table. So that is it for the presentation when we're talking about the cyber and the physical side. I am not able to see any of the chats as of right now, so I'll leave that to you, Al, if there was anything that popped up or anything you guys want to discuss.
Yeah, again, we do have one question. Actually, before I read that question, we did have a question as to whether the slides would be shared. Yeah, as one of the attendees commented, we will be posting the slides as well as the recorded session on the website. So they will be available in a couple days after we finish this presentation. Excuse me, sorry. And so to the question that's posted in the chat, this one is for Guam and CNMI. So it says more pertinent to Guam and CNMI. How would you best recommend where on almost all trace certs back to the US, the nearest hop from our sites are to Asia, such as JP, Japan, and Hong Kong? So I'm going to interpret that question and Fang, if you can take yourself off mute if you want to elaborate on that, the question. But I think the question is what the protections would you suggest given Guam and CNMI situation where their communication lines run not through the US, but through into Asia, so that there's worried that there might be a risk to the communications based on the path the data is taking.
Okay, so who mentioned that? Where was the comment from?
Feng Lizama.
Okay. Feng, is there anything you wanted to expand on that, on your question?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, this is Feng from CHC. Sorry, my boss, she wasn't able to attend. Because previously, I think you were on site here previously, sir, at
Yes.
CHCC in Saipan.
Mhm.
Because we got an advisory, because we're also like a critical infrastructure for CNMI to they were advising us against, like, let's say, connectivity to China-based sites, right? Because there was like a cyber incident from that region.
Okay.
But in a lot of our trace routes, the next hop, like let's say if it's not taken next hop to Japan, they're gonna take the next hop going to like Hong Kong. So how would you recommend, what would be your best practices to address that, sir?
Well, I think you know, coming from the physical security side, I think one of the main, I think, avenues that you have available to yourselves in Saipan is the Office of Information Technology. Is that correct? They kind of manage what the CNMI government is using when it comes to the different avenues for communications internet that is housed, I think, up at the Department of Finance. Have you been in contact with them?
Yes, sir. But as we're aware, their outside IP through Cato is like, yes, it's a US IP, but we don't avail of that service, sir.
Oh,
The
you guys don't know.
CHCC doesn't avail of that service.
Okay, okay. Yeah, you know, my recommendation to you would be, do you know Jenilyn LaBrenda? She is our cybersecurity advisor, and she is uh, I guess in Guam, but she also services the CNMI. So I would say, you know, I think for myself, I would recommend that, you know, I can put you in contact with her. Might be the best thing to have a chat with her on, you know, anything that she sees or maybe some of her recommendations. But if you want, I can always make that connection between you and her and then have that further discussion. Since she's already in the Guam and the CNMI area, I think she has probably better essay on some of the infrastructure and what you're dealing with out there. Is that
Hi,
something
Glenn.
that's good for you?
Again.
Oh, hey, Dane.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, hey, thanks. Sorry to bother. Just to kind of step in and mentioning about situational awareness. Just for Feng and CHCC side. So on the awareness side, CHCC operates autonomously from the government.
Okay.
So in Feng's situation of having directive overview or guidance from Office of Information Technology and consistent or relevant communication, it doesn't really happen between central government IT and the autonomous. So Feng coming from the medical side, which is autonomous, CHCC, and CUC, which is autonomous themselves on the power sector. So um, the two critical infrastructure in sectors are both autonomous outside of the central government, which is supposedly managed by OIT. And from my understanding, what Feng mentioned about Cato that is deployed by OIT is mostly used for the financial secured connection for the
Okay.
Munis system.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know what? Let me connect you with Jenilyn LaBrenda Feng, and then you can have I think a better conversation with Jen on maybe the best ways you guys can protect yourself since you're not you know, working with the OIT office since you're autonomous.
Yes, yes, thank you, sir. Yes, I think my boss, she's also we've been in communication with Miss Jen.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
Great. All right. And thanks, Dane, for the info on that. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
and
Thank you,
probably one thing
Dane.
that
Thank
yeah,
you.
welcome. Probably one thing that I want to add for awareness is it was already announced a few months back, if I can recall, but ITNE through Google is securing another fiber line that is, if I'm not mistaken, direct from the US. When that officially happens or is utilized, I don't have in front of me, but that's something that I can be reaching out to ITNE for an update, and then I could probably potentially grab their info slides to give you guys better awareness.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Copy.
Thanks, Dane.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and for those who don't know Dane works for CNMI's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Office. So if anybody is interested in any of the stuff he was talking about, at least you're hearing it from him, who's directly on Saipan there, along with Ben.
Yeah, and I'm usually the guy that almost everybody seems to be calling now for assistance. So actually, as a matter of fact, I have the TSA guys that are transportation sector or that are coming for to check out the critical infrastructure. So anybody that is on our group right now, if you get make your way to Saipan CNMI, feel free to reach out to me and I can do my best to assist you with anything that you guys need.
All right, thanks, Dane.
Yes, sir.
Very good, very good. And I see James has his hand raised. James Cruz, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, just that plugin from Gen's briefing, and of course the Intel briefing was great. I work for the transportation sector here in Honolulu for the rail, but I've used the services from both CISA and TSA, as well as the Fusion Center Intel information, regarding threats to infrastructure. But they came out and did a cybersecurity assessment as well. So this fiscal and cyber convergence is very important. But a plugin for them, they came out, did their thing, did their assessments, gave me some feedback, gave me the best practices that they had on hand, and I took those and mitigate those for our rail operations here in Honolulu. So they helped me create and finalize my cybersecurity incident plan, my emergency action plan, my physical security plan. Every single one of those was closed out based upon identified vulnerabilities, best practices, both cyber and physical. So I would really, let you guys know, reach out to them, because instead of making yourself work harder, make it easier by identifying your certain vulnerabilities, just like they were saying about the communications, right? There's a lot of information and background about, vulnerabilities for that, but it's good to get those assessments with your cybersecurity advisor and your protective security advisor. Just a plug-in for them, because they do a tremendous job for our private sector partners, not just the county, state, and the U.S. territory offices. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, James. And I guess I'll also give a shout out to CISA's protective service advisors, as well as the cyber security advisors. When I was with HMSA, Hawaii Medical Service Association, I did use their services to assess a number of our facilities. I had the benefit of being both the CISO and the CSO. So I was able to develop an integrated set of policies that covered cybersecurity, physical security, business continuity, emergency response. And then because I ran facilities as well, I was able to integrate it with the facilities protocols. So I can speak from experience to say that having an integrated set of policies and having clear communications between the different departments who are looking to protect any organization is a definite benefit. It helps to make the threat actors less effective in terms of what they're able to get out of your organization. So I really do encourage you to reach out to Gen and to everyone else at CISA to explore this in more detail. If you're not dealing with a fully integrated security architecture, even to the point of say regular operations being included. So I want to give a special shout out to Allison for participating today. I think a lot of the examples that Allison you put out resonate well with folks here. There definitely is a clear link between what happens to the physical part of our business and our environment that more and more every day gets linked tighter to the cyber side of things. given the Internet of Things, given how the internet is integrated into our controls and our daily lives. So the topic is timely. It is one of those things that, again, I'd really encourage you to go back to your executives, to your owners, to your teams, and really encourage them to embrace the concept of integrating the different security sectors, business continuity sectors, to make sure that the organization is protected. So with that, we are at the end of our time for this particular webinar. I want to thank Gen, and I apologize, I did not get Allison's information posted here. So actually, let me go back one slide, Allison. Sorry, I'm going to show your email again. If anyone has questions, I think they would be happy to talk to you, to answer any questions you have. And again, the more bridges you can build to folks at CISA and Homeland Security, I think the better it will be in the event that you unfortunately have an emergency, something you need help with. At least knowing people in these positions will help you out in those cases. So with that, I want to mention that we have our next webinar coming up on September 3rd. The topic is mobile device management and remote access. I think this pretty much pertains to any business operating today. So if you have any questions on that or any other of the topics we've covered, or if you just want to give us some additional topics, reach out to myself. My email address is there. I will be sending an email to you folks related to the posting of the recording and also the slides. And I'll also be asking you to fill out a brief feedback survey. So with that, I'm going to thank you for attending and wish you a great rest of the day and the rest of the week. Thank you very much. Mahalo.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have
Have
a
a
good
good
day.
day.
I'm going